Ravelry, I saw one pattern that I immediately fell in love with. I put it in my favorites and I've been wanting to make it ever since, and that pattern is the Esther jacket by petiteknit. The Esther jacket is an all-over structure cardigan, and at the time when I saw it, I was a beginner knitter and I definitely didn't have the skills to be starting a project like that. So it was just kind of sitting there for a few months until I thought, with a lot of trial and error and a lot of effort, probably I can now execute something like that. So I got the pattern and I got the yarn for it. This is filcolana Peruvian, and I was planning to cast on the jacket as soon as I was done with all of my whips. And then of course my whips kept dragging on for a little bit longer than expected. Suddenly it was spring, it got really warm, I didn't want to be working on a thick wool jacket, so I forgot about the project for a few months again. And then in the summer of last year, I decided I am casting this on early fall, because that way it can be my first warm project I am knitting. I can have the finished object for the entire cold season, and I'm really excited to make this. I really want to start on this jacket. So I sat down in the middle of summer and I knitted some swatches, and I decided to go with a 3.5mm needle, which is a very tiny needle for both the pattern and the yarn, because the pattern recommends a 5mm needle and the yarn recommends a 4 to 5mm needle. But I'm a more loose knitter. I was an even more loose knitter at that time. I was sizing down my needle quite significantly for almost every project I was making. And also I had swapped out this yarn at a time when I really didn't have much experience doing that, so I just assumed maybe I had miscalculated somehow. I just thought, okay, let's do 3.5mm. And then of course my whips kept dragging on for a little bit longer than expected, and I actually didn't cast on the jacket in early fall. It took me until I think the end of November before I finally cast on, so let's see how that went. I can't quite believe I'm saying this because I've been talking about this for almost a year, but I finally cast on the Esther jacket by petiteknit yesterday.
It's rocky on the mountaintop, like the beaches on Crete.
This is not my main project ever, really. I always have something more important to do somehow.
Makes me wonder what old man is thought when you sailed away with me.
I did do a mid-project vlog, and I have decided to pivot to making a different size.
Nothing's ever permanent. The thoughts less so than
my goal with this is kind of to get it done before the end of the year, but it'll get done when it gets done.
mine are hung up on a myth, yeah. And the beautiful
in the picture, it looks more like the ribbing just continues with the same amount of ease.
I've half a mind to tear this up. It's a living, breathing self-defeat.
I feel like my gauge looks pretty different on the sleeve than it looked like on the body.
But even as these words betray my trust, at least I trusted something sweet.
I started on the other sleeve with a 4mm needle.
I heard all about intentions, love.
I think I might actually set this aside for a little bit, maybe like a week or so.
And the wicked roads they pave, but without the honeyed tone you
I
struck.
don't usually mind ripping back and starting over on certain parts of my project. I think that's just part of the process, but in this case I'm exhausted by this project a little bit, to be honest. So basically what happened there, my swatch was a few months old, but I was too lazy to make another one. I was aware my tension had probably changed, which is why I did a mid-project block pretty soon into the project. And at that point I noticed that my gauge was off, and instead of just ripping back and starting over and knitting another swatch, which would have been the smart thing to do at that point, and at the point when I started, I instead decided to switch sizes and knit a bigger size. And that worked out pretty well for me. I think I got a garment that would fit me in the end. However, I ran into some significant problems with my tension, especially when I started working in the brown for the sleeves. So this is how far I got. This is my almost finished Esther jacket. It's really just missing some sleeves and the buttons. And it has been back here for the last few weeks because I was so frustrated and overwhelmed with this project. I had no idea how to fix the gauge issues I was having in the sleeves. And I just put it away and decided to think about it for a little bit. And then suddenly, earlier this week, I had a little bit of a revelation where it popped back into my mind that the recommended needle size for this project was actually 5mm. and that maybe my body looked so uneven because I was working on too small of a needle, and maybe the reason why I can't get the gauge of the sleeves to match the rest of the body is because neither of them are worked on a needle size that is correct for this project. So I did what I should have done back in November, and I swatched for this project again. I had my 3.5mm jacket right here. I made a swatch on 4mm, on 4.5mm, and on 5mm, and to nobody's surprise, this is my 5mm swatch and it's hitting gauge. So yeah, I think that might explain why my jacket doesn't really look the way I want it to look. I kind of knew there was really only one right answer. I just didn't want to believe that I actually have to start over on this project that is basically done. But yeah, I don't know if I can fix it any other way. So I cast on the back panel again on 5mm and on the size large that I was actually supposed to knit. And well, it looks quite nice. So I'm going to knit this entire cardigan again. So far I have this back panel. You start up here and then you work some increases for the shoulder over here, and then you just continue straight for a little bit longer and make some increases for the armhole over here. And well, now it's time to attach the front pieces. I will say so far the process of working this up again hasn't been too bad. I have worked with the pattern so much at this point that I know the pattern repeat by heart, even though it is quite like large and involves a lot of counting. So it went surprisingly fast. Also, working on the bigger needle size has been really fun because like if you've been working the same pattern repeat on 3.5mm needles and then you suddenly switch to 5, it feels like you're flying through this. I think I knitted so many more rows to get to this length for my first version. So actually this has been quite enjoyable. I don't need to do a lot of thinking. I remember I was making a lot of mistakes and I got very confused by, you know, keeping all of the right amounts of stitches between these different pattern elements here, like these triangles and these triangles and the stockinette in between. I don't really do that anymore, of course, because, you know, I've been practicing this. So it's going okay. I'm quite happy with this, and I think there is a chance that I will finish this entire jacket faster than I would have finished the other version if I actually went through with it. I think my morning right now will probably consist of taking this old version of it apart because there's like 10 balls of yarn in there and I need them back. And well, let's go.
Go on so long, it's better being good. It don't have to mean a thing. Go on so long, I swear I never wanted anything. Baby, right? Tell me you've been good. Tell me you've been happy, living like you should. Baby, right? Tell me I don't find no room in your mind, and it's all that I ask for.
I finished these both front pieces here. They actually went really quick. I think I only needed a couple of hours for each one of them, which is very fast, but somehow, I mean, they're only half as wide as the back, I guess, so it felt very fast. And when I'm working faster, I'm more motivated too, so I just kind of kept going. As you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, it always feels like you're almost done, which is pretty fun. And then I've already connected in the round late last night, and I've worked a few rows since then. I think I'm gonna finish like one pattern repeat under the arms here, because in my case it worked out in a way where I was done with a whole pattern repeat after the back panel and these front panels. So I could just start on a new one when I connected in the round. So I'm gonna finish one and then I'm gonna try it on. I think I have to put it on a piece of scrap yarn still. When I worked my first version, I had it on a very long cable, so I could just try it on the needle, which was really practical. But it also meant that I was shifting my stitches around quite a bit, which is not something I enjoy. It just felt like slower knitting somehow, and I also didn't have a longer cable in this needle size. So this is what we're working with. I think this is a 100 centimeter cable. But it seems like it should fit, and I am hitting gauge exactly, which is kind of crazy. I haven't measured like the gauge exactly, but I've measured like the whole jacket, like the panels I've been working, and they are exactly how big they should be, which is great. I'm very happy about that. I'm also a lot happier with my cast on up here, it feels a lot more stretchy. On my plan here, I'm just gonna keep working the body. It's just worked straight down. There's no increases, no decreases, no nothing until I hit the hem. That's pretty boring, honestly, and the rows are very long, so this is kind of the point where I lost motivation on this project a little bit last time I worked it. The back and the front panels also went relatively fast, I believe, and then here is kind of where I stopped picking it up as much, just because it's like so much work to do one row already that before you can get properly into the pattern, it's almost like time to stop knitting again. So that part is not the most fun to me, but I at least know that I struggle with this part now, so I can pay more attention to actually staying on track, and I hope I can get through it semi-fast.
Baby, rave and tell me you're good.
That was the last row of the body. That was weirdly fast. I filmed the last clip only a few days ago, so now we're here. I reached almost as far down as the pattern says, and I did it in like half a pattern repeat less than what the gauge suggests I should be doing. So I'm like slightly off gauge, but over this much fabric, I think that should be very much fine. And this was really fun, surprisingly. I think I just didn't stay in the pattern enough the last time I was knitting this. Like, I would take such long breaks that every time I picked this project back up, it was such a pain to like relearn the pattern repeat. And now, I mean, I still like to have it open next to me, especially because the beginning of the row is kind of difficult to remember for me. So it's just easier to have it here at a glance. But you know, I could like always tell where I was and what was happening in the pattern, so that was really nice, and I just flew through this in a few evenings. One thing I did differently this time is I put in 2 stitch markers, so one over here and one under the other arm, and the reason for that is that I kept making mistakes here the last iteration that I knitted, because there are these continuous lines that are always knitted. So this line, for example, or this line, there are quite a few of them in this piece. And then under the arm, it's just more stitch. So you have this section where you just knit one, purl one all the time. And when I was coming from the wrong side, it was kind of difficult to see where to get out of that pattern of the moss stitch. So over here, the moss stitch like continues for this little triangle section here. So you have to alternate every row how much of the moss stitch you keep doing after you hit this line. And the line is visible from the other side. Okay, you can't, I mean, this is the line, but as you can see, it's like not glaringly obvious. Like from the right side, it's very obvious that you're hitting the line, but from the wrong side, I mean, I can't tell when I look at it, but if you're just like in the flow of knitting, you can skip it quite easily. So that was like my biggest source of mistakes the last time I knitted this, that I just was working on the wrong side and I didn't realize I skipped this line, and then I just kept going with the moss stitch and it was frustrating to go back. So I put in these 2 stitch markers. That's not in the pattern, but I found them really helpful. That eliminated almost all of these mistakes for me. There were still a few times, obviously, where I messed up, but usually I could tell within the same row, so it was really no big deal to go back. I think I remember 2 times where I had to ladder down a few stitches, but it was always only a few stitches, so that was really fine. I think the first time I knitted this, I had a few instances where I realized I made a mistake like 8 rows down, and you don't really want to rip back if this is how long your rows are. So I was just laddering down, which was kind of complicated to do with this much structure involved, but it went pretty smoothly this time. I would say my gauge looks better. It looks more tidy somehow, even though the needle size is bigger. So I'm quite happy with that. And I think I also had like a mental breakthrough, because I think I finally realized how some of the knitting podcasts I'm watching, like how these people are knitting so many garments. Because I essentially knitted this once in a 2XL and once in a large now, and it is actually crazy how much faster you are when you're knitting a smaller size. Like, I understood that it's less stitches always, but I didn't think it would make that big of a difference, because it's still a whole garment, it's still a sweater, and obviously if you knit like an extra small and a 5XL, I thought the difference would be like noticeable, but that the difference is so noticeable with only 2 sizes of difference in between actually like broke my mind a little bit. So I was quite fascinated by that, but I guess if you think about it, it does make sense that it piles up, you know, like if every row you just knit a few more stitches, that is actually quite many stitches over the duration of a whole garment like that. So I understand why they all knit so many sweaters now. It's not that I'm slower or knitting less or whatever, it's just that they are tiny. I also decided I'm gonna make a small adjustment now before I start on the hem, because if you remember my last hem, I was a little bit unhappy about it because it did cinch in a little bit, and I don't like the way that looks on me. It does make sense that it would cinch in if you switch to a smaller needle size and you keep the stitch count the same, but somehow in the sample picture it looked very straight, so I thought it wouldn't. But it did cinch in, and I was kind of already expecting to have to knit that part at least again. So now that I'm knitting everything again, I might as well fix that before it happens. So I'm gonna work some increases now. I'm gonna switch to the 4.5mm needle for the ribbing, and then I'm gonna, I guess, like increase every 7 stitches probably. And that should give me a number of stitches that keeps the length the same as the body, like the circumference of the hem, I guess. So I'm gonna do that. I actually haven't decided how. Am I just gonna work a row stockinette? That might kind of look out of place. Maybe I'm just gonna stay in pattern for that. And then I will start on the ribbing, and that hopefully should avoid the cinching in effect. And I don't know, I'm not really looking forward to the ribbing. It's kind of boring to knit. I like this project because there's something going on right now. I don't know. I've been complaining about having too many projects where there's something going on for the last couple of weeks, but somehow now that I have a project where there's actually something going on, I'm really excited about it.
I've half a mind to tear this up. It's a living, breathing self-defeat. But even as these words betray my trust, at least I trusted something sweet.
I'm not saying I'm stronger than you or better than you, but I did 2 sweater hem bind-offs in Italian bind-off yesterday. So I feel like I deserve some kind of an award, and one of them was this. This is my Esther jacket, and I am pretty much done with the body. I mean, I have to weave in all of the ends, but other than that, I'm done with the body. So this is what it ended up looking like. I did the ribbing last night and then immediately bound off, and I am relatively happy with it, I would say. I did do my 1 increase row that I talked about, and I only increased every, I think, 13 stitches, because my plan was to do every 7 at first, and I thought that would be way overkill. I didn't want it to flare out either, so I kind of settled on every 7, and I do wish I had done some more, like something in between 7 and 13 would have probably been the sweet spot. It still cinches in a little bit, but it's fine, I think. It cinches in to an extent where I can mostly block it out, I think. At least that's what it seems like to me. I did the increase row in ribbing already. I thought about integrating it into the pattern above, but then, I don't know, I started thinking about it some more, and I realized that wouldn't really make sense, because you can't just like do random increases in a pattern and then expect it to look the same. And I didn't really want to do it in just stockinette. I think that's how most sweaters work when you do this type of increase row, but since there's this moss stitch section here and then the ribbing is attached to it, I thought it might look like awkward if there was 1 row of just stockinette in between. So I just did knit 1, purl 1 ribbing, and I think most of the time it actually matched up with these lines in here that I showed earlier. These like long lines that run all throughout the jacket, that these would be a knit column in the ribbing as well. So most of the time that just worked out, and when it didn't work out, I kind of like placed my increase slightly differently, like did it after or before to make sure it would match up. I'm actually really proud of my Italian bind-off. It got like much better. I've been doing a lot of Italian bind-off recently, and I've been getting pretty good at it. I think it looks pretty neat. I think my first tries looked a little more scuffed, and I don't know, I'm fast with it. I mean, it takes forever, but I'm faster with it now, and I can actually remember all the steps, so that's quite nice. And now is the part that I'm a little bit worried about, the part where I have to pick up for the sleeve stitches. And last time I did that, I remember it was kind of difficult to pick up the correct amount of stitches, because it always felt like I should pick up more. Like I was skipping quite a lot of fabric here before I picked up the next stitch, and I did feel like it didn't look that great, like it almost cinched in the armhole a little bit. So I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to go about this now. I could just stick to the pattern, which is probably a smart thing to do, or I could try to add some extra stitches here, because the underside of the armhole is just going to be moss stitch, so technically it wouldn't really matter if I picked up some more stitches there. The arms were the main part that didn't really work out last time, so I'm kind of worried about them. I do have a very short 5cm needle though, I don't even know if this is 40 centimeters, it might be less. But I hope that that will be kind of nicer to knit on than the 3.5 I was doing before, because that cable was longer. So I feel like I knitted tighter than before because I was pulling on the yarn so much to like for the stitches to stretch around the cable, if that makes sense. So I'm hoping that this would be fine. I don't know what to do about that. I've knitted one petite knit garment before. That was the ivy top, and the armhole there didn't work out at all either. And I have heard a lot of people talk about how the sleeves in petite knit garments are always very tiny. So I've seen like a lot of people do adjustments where they will take some stitches away from the body circumference and put them in the sleeve and stuff like that. So I am thinking maybe it would make sense to pick up some extra stitches here. I don't know. Maybe I'm just gonna try to pick up according to pattern and I see how that looks, and if I don't like it I will pick up some more stitches and I will let you know once I'm done. And well, let's do this.
Baby, right, and tell me you've been good, tell me you've been happy, living like you should, and baby, right, and tell me I don't fight, no, man, you're mine, and it's all that I would ask for, all that I pray, that nothing I love, 'cause you and me, baby, right, and tell me you're good.
I'm happy to report that I have almost 2 full sleeves. So this is my first sleeve that I knitted, and then this is my second one. And I actually picked up the number of stitches for the armhole here that was in the pattern. I was a bit unsure about it because for the first iteration that I knitted, it seemed like very little stitches for the circumference, but for this one it was fine somehow. I'm not sure why that is, but it worked out pretty well. And then I did a little bit of an experiment here where I knitted an increase row before the cuff, just to see what it would look like if the cuff went like straight down from the sleeve without getting any smaller. And for this sleeve I didn't do the increase row, and from the state of them you can probably see which one I like more. So this is going to be the one that I go with, which is just exactly following the pattern, no increases whatsoever. I only ran into one real problem with this, which was entirely my fault, because for this moss stitch section under the arm here, the pattern tells you what stitch to start with. So this is the beginning of round, like under the arm, and then it says to either start with a knit stitch or a purl stitch for your moss stitch pattern, depending on your size. And I messed up there and I started with the wrong one, and I just at the time thought, oh, whatever, doesn't really matter. And then I came to the cuff here and I realized that it actually does matter if you want your ribbing in the cuff to still follow that moss stitch pattern. And also another thing that I did is I made the sleeve a little bit longer because it was very short on me. So I added a full pattern repeat to the length of it. So it gives you a centimeter amount for how long your sleeves should be. And when I reached that, I thought it was too short and I added another pattern repeat. And in that pattern repeat, I kept the decrease pattern up, so I knitted an extra decrease, which then also led to the cuff not really matching up with the amount of stitches that I had. So in the end, I knitted one extra row before I started the cuff, where I decreased another stitch, and then I knitted another half row from the beginning of round, which was under the arm here. So I just knitted this part until I reached the pattern repeat on top of the arm here. And then I started my ribbing from here, so I moved the beginning of round like a third of a round further down, so that my pattern in the ribbing would match up. And then the last modification that I made, which was just my personal preference and had nothing to do with me messing up, was that I knitted a half-twisted rib, because this sweater that I recently made, I knitted half-twisted rib on that, and I like the way that looks so much more compared to what my hem ribbing looks like. I feel like it looks so uneven in comparison now. It didn't bother me before, but now that I've seen this one, I'm like obsessed with half-twisted rib. So I decided to do that, and it looks so much neater and it's so nice, and it's kind of making me want to redo the hem again. I already had one thing that I was unhappy with here, which is that it's still cinching in even though I did increases, and I feel like I could have done more increases. And when I try it on, it's just very noticeable that up here I have a lot less space between my two front panels than I have at my hips, which makes sense because my body gets bigger there, but also the ribbing is cinching in, so it's not making it any better. And it looks like uneven now in comparison. I really don't want to purl through the back loop, but I kind of want to redo it. Is that really dumb? I've spent so much time on this project and I'm thinking like with just a tiny bit more effort I could make it even better. So I think I might actually do that. I have enough yarn, so it's not going to be an issue. I can just cut out the Italian bind off again and unravel the ribbing and then knit some more increases before it, make it half twisted, make it look really nice. Should I do that? I'm probably going to do that. I feel like this whole video is just me looking at this garment, finding something to be unhappy with and then unraveling it to start over. But, well, that's my process, so I guess that's what I'm going to do. But other than that, I just have the button band now and this little bit of cuff, of course. But I'm actually really excited for the button band. I've never knitted one. I've never made a cardigan before. I don't really wear a ton of cardigans, to be honest. I don't own one currently. And I think what I found nice about this one is that it kind of looks like a sweater with buttons in the front. I prefer the O-neck cardigans a lot over the V-neck ones. So I'm curious to knit a button band. It's like a new experience for me. And, well, we'll see if that's fun, especially if I'm also doing it in half-twisted rib. I shouldn't have started with a half-twisted rib, should I?
Go on, so long is better being gone. It don't have to mean a thing. Go on, so long, I swear I never wanted anything.
So I indeed did that. I reknitted the entire hem on this again. And this is where I'm at now. As you can see, my ribbing here looks a lot neater and I am very happy with my decision to knit it again. Though I ran into this problem where you make one modification and then because you made that one modification, you have to make another one and another one and another one, and it's kind of cascading down. But let me catch you up. Essentially, I knitted this sweater that I was wearing in the last clip, the sweater with the horses, and I really like the half-twisted rib on this. So when I got to the cuff here, I thought I should also knit half-twisted rib on this, which would then mean I would have to reknit the hem because it was not half-twisted rib. But I don't like it anyway, so it's fine. And then I had two things I don't like about it, that it cinches in and that it's like slightly uneven. So that was enough for me to meet the threshold of I'm unraveling this and starting over. So I knitted this in half-twisted rib. Then I knitted this in half-twisted rib, the hem here, and I did that by increasing every third stitch after the pattern repeat was done, which is quite a lot of stitches, but the gauge is a lot tighter in the half-twisted rib than it is in just ribbing even. So that was necessary, and it worked out well. I wouldn't say it's too many increases, it sits exactly straight. So this is what it looks like now, but it was a bunch of purling through the back loop, because when you knit half-twisted rib in the round, you only knit through the back loop and you don't purl through the back loop, which is why I'm knitting half-twisted rib instead of just full twisted rib in the first place. But when you're knitting it flat, you have to purl through the back loop on the wrong side of your work. And I was kind of convincing myself to make this switch by saying I could just cut the yarn every row and then reattach it from the other side and just knit right side rows of the ribbing. But when I got to that point, I realized that actually the purling through the back loop wasn't that bad. This yarn is very easy to work with. It is like relatively stretchy, but it's not very fluffy. It runs through your hands very, very well compared to some of the other yarns I've been working with recently. The Let Lopi that I was working with for this horse sweater that I showed earlier, it was just very fluffy, and right now I'm also working on a mohair blouse, which is also just, you know, a little bit more difficult to deal with. So purling through the back loop with this was actually not that bad. And I ultimately decided that it would be easier than cutting my yarn every row. So I did a lot of purling through the back loop. I did my Italian bind off again, it took quite a while. And then I actually picked up for the button band last night already. It was very dark, so I didn't film it for you, but I will show you once I get to the other side of it. I somehow got my needles stuck in my knitting and I completely lost orientation in this entire cardigan. There we go. This is gonna be my button band, or one side of it. I'm starting on the right side and I'm knitting the buttonholes on this side as it is in the pattern. Essentially, the reason why I'm making more adjustments to this is, first of all, the half twisted rib. As I was saying, you do one thing and then you have to do another thing and another thing. So the first thing that I adjusted is the pickup rate, because as I said, the half twisted rib is very tight. So I picked up a lot more stitches than what the pickup rate in the pattern suggested. The pattern gives you a couple of stitch counts and you should hit one of them to be able to space your buttonholes correctly. And I am hitting one of them, but one for essentially a higher size than what I am making. And I did shorten this also, so it should technically be even less, but because of my pickup rate, it is quite a lot of stitches. And the second thing I am modifying because of the half twisted rib is the row count in the button band. So you essentially knit like 2 rows and then you make the buttonhole and then you knit another 2 rows. So the buttonhole sits in the middle. And I am now done with the first 2 rows and I feel like this is very like tiny. I think you can see better from the wrong side where I picked up my stitches. So this is where I picked up the stitches and this is my 2 rows of the button band now. And the buttons are 2 centimeters, or they're supposed to be 2 centimeters. And I have some buttons that I got, I think, at like a €1 shop about like a year ago or something, because I was making a gift knit and I needed one button. And I just bought the cheapest ones I could find. But that's the only buttons I have at home. And coincidentally, I feel like they match the cardigan pretty well. They are very similar looking to what is in the sample picture. And I really like those buttons. So this is what they look like. They're definitely not like great buttons, I think, but I like them well enough, and I mean it's just a button, so I can always switch it out at some point if I find one that I would prefer. I'm gonna use that one, but they are 2 centimeters as the pattern suggests, and I just feel like if I knit the buttonhole now, it's gonna like look really weird. Like the button is too big for how wide my button band is at this point. And I think it's also because the half twisted rib is tighter, so the row gauge is also tighter, and that's why I've decided I'm gonna knit row 1 and 2 of the button band twice, and then also the row 4 and 5, so essentially everything except the buttonhole itself. And that way I'm gonna have a button band that is probably a little bit thicker than what is in the pattern, but that actually, you know, can hold my button and fits the button on there. And then I'm making one more modification to this button band, which is a lot of modifications considering this is my first button band, but I've decided to use more buttons. I just laid my cardigan out and then I tried what it looked like with the 5 buttons that are in the pattern, and I found that it looks a little like there's too much space in between the buttons. I personally didn't really like it, and I had more buttons, so I settled on using 7 buttons altogether. And that's why right now I'm not knitting 4 buttonholes for this button band in the front, but I'm knitting 6. There was a little bit of math I had to do because of that, but there's also an example calculation for how you find out how many stitches you're supposed to have between the buttons, and I could just change up some of the numbers there. It was pretty easy. So I'm gonna have some more buttons and I'm gonna have a bit of a bigger button band, but I'm hoping that should be fine, even though I technically have no idea what I'm doing. But it's going really fast. I thought this button band part, or the whole finishing part of this cardigan, would take a lot longer. I mean, I haven't done that much, but I've picked up the stitches and knitted like 2 rows on it, so I feel like I have a good idea of how long this is going to take. And I don't know, I really expected this to drag on a lot, because I feel like I've heard many people who make a bunch of cardigans talk about how like upsetting it is to kind of be done with the sweater part of a cardigan, like where you would usually just bind off a sweater and be done when you have like all the sleeves and the body done and everything. And for a cardigan, obviously you still have to do the buttons, so that's like an extra step you're adding on top of that. And I thought that would be like annoying to do, but somehow it's been really fun and it's going a lot faster than I was thinking. But I'm also acknowledging that I'm doing it for the first time. It might be more fun because of that. So if I ever knit another cardigan, I might feel differently about it. But right now, this is pretty great. And I think there's a high chance I can finish this today. It's a Sunday and I have the day. So I think that's what I'm going to be working on over the span of today. And then hopefully tonight I have something to block.
It's rocky on the mountaintop, like the beaches on Crete. Makes me wonder what old man started when you sailed away with me. nothing's ever permanent. The thoughts less so than most. Mine are hung up on a myth, yeah, and a beautiful ghost. Baby, right, tell me you've been good. Tell me you've been happy, living like you should. Baby, right, tell me I don't find no room in your mind. And it's all that I'd ask for, all that I pray. And there's nothing I've done caused you any pain. Baby, right, and tell me you're good. Baby, right, and tell me you've been good. Tell me you've been happy, living like you should. And baby, right, and tell me I don't find no room in your mind. And it's all that I would ask for, all that I pray. That nothing I've done causes you any pain.
I actually finished my jacket that day, but it took me until 2 a.m. at night before I was done with the blocking, so I needed a little bit more time than I was originally expecting, but we got it done. I had somewhat trouble with the modifications that I did for the extra buttons because I didn't read the instructions, so when I was planning out my button placement, I only read the little calculations that came before that, and I didn't really read through how you're supposed to knit the button band. And I made some wrong assumptions about why some of the numbers in the calculations were there. So for me, it ended up in a way where I had an uneven number of stitches in between my buttons, which then caused me to have to sometimes knit and sometimes purl the extra stitch that was cast on to make the buttonhole. And that then caused some of the buttonholes to be smaller than others. So I went back on that, and I now have, I think, sometimes 20 and sometimes 18 stitches in between my buttons. So I have an even number, and that way it all worked out, but I don't think it's like a noticeable problem in this garment. And I made one more small modification up here because for the edge here of the collar and also the edge of the button band, you're only like casting on one extra stitch as an edge stitch. And I did that for the button band, and I thought it didn't look that clean. So here I just knitted a 3-stitch I-cord instead, and I would recommend it. Like slightly throws off the knit one purl one pattern, but I find that looks like neater than what I did down here. But you know, it's a tiny detail. And well, for the rest of what I was finishing here, it was really just a lot of knitting and purling through the back loop and Italian bind off. I think I bound off over 700 stitches in Italian bind off on this whole garment, and actually considering that I knitted the hem 3 times, over 1,000. So yeah, it was a lot of knitting, but I'm very happy with the final outcome. But before I chat about the pattern, I have some thoughts to share about the yarn that I used. This is filcolana Peruvian. It was my first time working with it, and also my first time working with any filcolana yarn. I'm on a bit of a journey to try out all of the popular yarns and see what they're all about. And this is definitely going on my list of to be used again yarns. I really liked how soft this is. This isn't like scratchy or woolly at all. I don't think anybody would have issues with this close to skin. And I don't know a lot about sheep or spinning or the whole process of how this is made, but on the website it says that this Peruvian Highland sheep yarn is like a crossbreed between merino and something else. So from like the softness, it feels very close to merino to me. It is a little bit loftier, I guess. So the merinos I've worked with, they're very dense, and this seems like springier. I feel like when you're supposed to say something about the wine and you don't really know words that I use to describe wine, so I'm just making some up. But I really enjoyed this. It is not very fluffy, so there isn't like a halo to it, which is really good for something like this, like structure or I guess cables or color work if you want like really crisp colorwork designs. I think personally I wouldn't hold it by itself for a stockinette sweater. I would like some more fluff for that, so I would either add something or use another yarn for that. But obviously if you're looking for a very like clean polished stockinette look, this would also be a great option. And the reason I chose this in the first place is because it was more affordable than what was suggested in the pattern. So petiteknit suggests that you hold 3 strands of wool together, I believe, and I've at least found that whenever you can replace multiple strands by a single strand, the cost falls very significantly. Obviously this is still not a cheap yarn, but compared to how much it would have been to make this garment with the suggested yarn, I feel like this was a comparatively affordable option that worked out very, very well, so I would recommend. I also put this yarn through a lot already, so I mean I knitted this up once and then I unraveled and washed it and wound it into balls again and reused it, so I'm generally assuming this will hold up well, and I'm very pleased with my experience. My experience with the pattern wasn't quite as positive. First of all, I wanted to say that none of me unraveling this had anything to do with the pattern, that was all on me. That being said, I don't think it's written very well. I'm gonna go on a bit of a tangent now, but I have 3 main issues with it. All of them are minor issues, so it's not like that takes away from your ability to work with this pattern, but it's just something I've noticed, and I feel like if you're the most popular knitwear designer, it's fair to look at the details. But yeah, all that to say, I think petiteknit is a great designer. I will continue to work with her patterns. It is just like 3 little things that I've kind of noticed while working through this and also some of her other patterns that I have some thoughts on that I would like to share. Feel free to like leave your thoughts below, but so for me, first of all, I noticed that I don't really like the way that she writes her paragraphs. That might be somewhat of a personal preference, but I also think there are certain rules about how you write a paragraph. So for the first sentence of a paragraph, you usually have an introductory sentence. You will tell your readers, this is what I'm going to be talking about in the paragraph, and then you elaborate on that. And I understand that some knitting patterns are very short and frank and to the point, and I can understand omitting this introductory sentence, saying, hey, you have a headline here, this is about, I don't know, the back yoke, so this is the instructions. However, for her patterns, I feel like her first sentence is always trying to be an instruction as well as an introduction to the paragraph. And I find that very confusing to read because it gives you like half the information and then leaves you wondering where the rest of it is. And all of the information is there. You have to continue reading to get it. But I find the way that it's phrased confusing. So if I was writing a pattern and I wanted to now go on to the shoulder section here, I would say something like, next, stitches are picked up along the edge of the back yoke to form the right shoulder. And then I would start with the instructions, saying something like join a new yarn, use a 5mm needle, hold your garment like this, cast on X amount of stitches. And for her, the first sentence, that gives you information already while introducing you to what you're doing now, but some of the information is there and some of it is not there. So in this case, for example, in the pattern, it says, join a new yarn and pick up stitches from the right side with a 5mm needle, and period. And that is the first sentence. And I'm just left wondering, like, okay, but where exactly on the right side am I picking up stitches? How many stitches am I picking up? And I can get all of that information by reading further, but I'm always confused after her first sentence. And maybe that's just how I like to read patterns. But it seems to me a little bit like she's unsure whether she wants to be someone who gives you the amount of detail that would warrant having this introduction sentence, or whether she wants to be someone that is short and to the point and just leaves the introduction sentence out. And I'm noticing that in her paragraphs, but also in what information she decides to include in this and what information she is leaving out. And that is probably my biggest issue with this pattern, is that I feel like usually she holds your hand a lot. Like in every single pattern, she will tell you how to do a make one left increase. In every single pattern, there is a link somewhere to a tutorial video for her to do something. She like spells out things very detailed. So for example, here where you're knitting just knit one, purl one, ribbing, there's this edge stitch that like throws off the pattern in a sense. So you would knit one for the edge and then knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one. And she writes that out for you. She says like knit one and then repeat knit one, purl one to the end of the row. She doesn't just say knit stitches as they present, which would also be a fine option and a lot shorter, you know? So if she is someone who writes in a way where all of the information is included, it sometimes baffles me a little bit what information is left out of this pattern, and I brought some examples. So first of all, You're knitting, I guess, these shoulder sections and also the back yoke, but I'm going to show it here because it's easier from the front. So you're knitting that, and you have this line here where you're always turning because that's the end of your row. And then you're doing some increases here for the armhole before you connect in the round. And for these increases, you're just told to work in the moss stitch here, and then you're suddenly told make an increase. And you're also told make one left or make one right and do it on that row. But you're not told how you're supposed to integrate that one increase into a 2-stitch repeat. So the moss stitch, you knit one per one, and then you do the opposite in the next row. But if you're only knitting one increase, that obviously throws off your pattern, and you're not being told how to resolve that issue. So I think if you're somebody who wants to include all of the detail to the point where you're saying, here you have to knit a stitch and then knit another stitch, I feel like you should like tell me how I'm supposed to do that. Like, it's fine, I can figure it out, but you know, like, why is one thing included and the other one isn't? The same thing I have with the charts that are in here. So you get a chart for the back yoke, this trapezoid that you do first. You get a chart for the right shoulder and a chart for the left shoulder, but you don't get a full comprehensive chart for knitting the body. So when you're knitting the body, you're piecing that together out of 3 separate charts that are spread across 4 pages, and while you also cast on stitches in between them. And it works, you can do it, like you have to do some flipping around in your head. Probably you will only be looking at one of those charts, and you know, it's like not that much of an ask, but also it's a very long pattern and you're including a lot of detail everywhere else. Just give me like 2 extra pages where you have one chart where I can see everything. And then there are some instances here where I'm not sure whether she left that information out on purpose or whether she just forgot to include it. But in that case, I would assume it came up during test knitting, so I don't know. For example, here under the arms, you're supposed to cast on stitches when you connect all of the pieces. And then it just says continue working in pattern. But I just cast on stitches and they don't have a pattern yet, so I had to refer back to the picture to see that this is almost stitched under the arm, because there's some extra stitches. There might be like one of those triangles. For all I know, you know, there's not a pattern yet, so I feel like you should tell me what to do here. Or also for the button band and the collar here, it doesn't tell you the orientation that you're supposed to be holding your garment while you're picking up stitches. It does for the shoulder here, so it'll say, oh, you have the right side facing you and you're starting here and picking up in this direction. But for these, it doesn't say that. It just says, oh, pick up stitches, and then it says the next row is a wrong side row. So you have to like figure out how to hold it yourself to know how you're supposed to pick up stitches and from which edge you're supposed to start. And, you know, I'm like not sure if that was just missed somehow or if that was left out on purpose. And if it's left out on purpose, why is it here but not here? There's also one instance here where you are casting on stitches for the neck here, I guess. So you're working the shoulder from up here and you just work back and forth, and then at some point you're casting on some extra stitches to form this edge. And when you're working the right shoulder, that works very well because it happens after a right side row. So you're knitting, all of your stitches are on your right needle and you have your working yarn attached from here, and then you can do the backwards loop and cast on the stitches. However, for the left shoulder, it happens on the same row, but because it's flipped, you're supposed to cast on the stitches before you start knitting your right side row. So you have all of your stitches on your left needle and your like working yarn is also attached there, and then you're supposed to cast on stitches onto your right needle, and then you have like, that doesn't work. Like you have to cast it on the row before and then turn and then knit them or something. But it doesn't make sense. And similarly, for the same section, you work the right shoulder before you work the left shoulder, but in the pattern, the chart for the left shoulder is before the right shoulder. And they're the same size, it's not like a space issue. So I'm just wondering, like, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just put the charts in order in which they appear in your pattern? So I guess my point here is, sometimes when I'm reading through this pattern, I am not sure whether all of the information that is left out here is truly left out on purpose or whether it is missing on accident. And if it is missing on accident, I don't understand how that hasn't like come up from her just reading through this, or from somebody proofreading this, or from test knitting. Like if I was a test knitter, I would say, oh, I'm having trouble picking up stitches here, or the charts are in the wrong order, or something like that. So that kind of leads me to my third issue with it, which is the difficulty. This is rated as a 5 out of 5 stars difficulty on petiteknit's difficulty scale, and I'm fine with that. Like, I think there are more difficult patterns than this one out there, but also petiteknit designs a lot of very basic items, so if on her difficulty rating this is the most difficult she'll go, then that's fine by me. I just find that in this pattern, the difficult parts, the ones that I found challenging, they came from the issues I described above, like the pattern just being not quite clear and me having to go and figure that out for myself, and not from the actual action of the knitting. Like, it wasn't complicated, to me at least, to knit structure and shaping and pick up stitches from here and there at the same time. It was more challenging for me to figure out which orientation I was supposed to hold my garment while picking up stitches, because it was not set in the pattern. And I just feel like if a pattern is difficult, the difficulty shouldn't come from the pattern writing or from information that is missing. And I feel like there's a difference between information that is missing and the pattern just not being very hand-holding to you. So I recently knitted this year, this horse sweater, which is from a vintage pattern, and vintage patterns are usually very short, and this pattern is no exception. It is, I think, a page long. However, at no point during this pattern I ever felt like anything was unclear or confusing. Like, there was all of the information that I needed there. You needed to do a little bit more thinking for yourself to figure out how to put that into action. But I was never once sitting there like, what? How's that supposed to work? And I feel like that happened quite a lot during this pattern. All that being said, it is an alright pattern. You can knit this garment with it, I am very sure. I think petiteknit is a genius designer. I think time and time again she manages to strike a perfect balance between something that is trendy and timeless, something that is engaging to knit but looks very simple, something that is very wearable but interesting to look at. Like, she does that incredibly well, which is the reason why she's so popular, and I'm not at all like arguing with that or wanting to hate on her. Obviously a lot of people work very well with her patterns and really love them and find them very clear and all that. I just guess I wanted to provide a bit of a different perspective because I got a little bit frustrated while working on this sometimes. Obviously all of these are very, very minor issues, and they are not even a problem to me enough that I would not work with her patterns anymore. I actually recently cast on another one of her patterns, so it's all like fine. I'm just thinking, like, if you want to be the most popular knitwear designer, you can stand a little criticism of your writing. So you can let me know your thoughts about that, like if you've noticed that with her patterns too, or if you've knitted this specific pattern, if you've noticed the problems that I was describing earlier. Maybe I'm just too dumb to pick up stitches, that might also be it. But after all of that complaining, I still got a great finished object out of it. I think this is stunning. I really like the amount of positive ease that I have. It grew a little bit with blocking in both length and width, but not very significantly. I really love the structure. I think it's stunning. I still love this design, absolutely. I like the yarn I used, I like my buttons, it's all great. I'm mostly happy with my modifications too. I think the half twisted rib looks great. I think for the collar and the button band I could have picked up some less stitches. So for the hem, I obviously already like had fabric and stitches attached, so I had to do increases, and I increased every third stitch. And mathematically, following my gauge, I should have increased every 2.3 stitches. So I did a little bit like less increases, and I think that hit the perfect spot for how many stitches there are supposed to be in the ribbing compared to the structure here. I think for these parts where I followed my gauge and calculations very exactly, I could have done with some less stitches. I think with time there is a certain risk that this might stretch out a little bit. I already put some elastic in the neckband here, mainly because mine sits a little bit higher because I modified that to match the button band here. Generally it's fine for now, and if it ever bothers me, if it stretches out, it is a one-day fix, so that's all fine. I'm actually very proud of myself for completing this. At this point in my knitting journey, it wasn't really challenging in terms of skills anymore, I would say. But it was still a very challenging project to me. I obviously completely unraveled my first version of this, and I'm actually I'm very happy that I'm at a point now where I'm doing that. I think a year ago I would have been a lot more focused on getting that one done, even if it's not great, and then casting on something new. But now, as the excitement of being able to make anything I want is fading a little bit, which is not a bad thing. It gives me more I guess, time to go back on the things that I am making or have made and make sure that they are exactly how I want them to be. So I'm gonna go enjoy my finished object now. I'm gonna show you some photos of it, and I will see you next time.
It's rocky on the mountaintop, like the beaches on Crete. Makes me wonder what old miners thought when you sailed away with me. Nothing's ever permanent. The thoughts less so than most.